All right, everybody. Well, thanks for coming to tonight's event. Give yourself a round of applause because this is our live event in 2 or 3 years. So we're very excited to have this. And I just wanted to quickly introduce the team. Oh, that's right. So that's Sean Wilson, who's our styling and stages right there. He's back. Right, and then we have Alex Magoo and Ramses Hajid, who are team top salespeople. And then we have Danny Sassoon, who's our mortgage broker, and Gary Katz, our attorney. So we're going to kind of give a little bit of a round robin. Sorry, I should actually be in the camera. I'm sorry about that. Never made it as an actor, Alex. All those classes. So anyway, Ramses is gonna do kind of the MC for everything, but it's kind of a quick overview. Because the idea here is like, the market is just so nutty and crazy right now for buying. We're gonna specifically focus on buying in this segment, but afterwards, if there's questions about rentals or selling or something, we're happy to field everything. But we're gonna kind of go along with this with the order of things are. So usually, you're going to talk to a mortgage broker first. How much can I afford? What are rates? What's going on? And then we're going to have Gary. He's going to talk about the attorney, why you need an attorney, and that type of thing. And then Alex and I are going to talk a little bit about the market. But without further ado, I want to bring up Ramses, who's our newest member. Take it away. Yeah, so they can see you in front of the camera.
Thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to do this, and today we're going to talk about. Okay.
What's that? You just want to make sure you're in the camera. You gotta stay right.
We got a movie star here, yeah. So
That's it.
all right. 1 second. All right, so what we're going to do, first let's call up Danny Sassoon, who is going to talk to us about mortgages and how this all works and everything. So in 10 minutes or less, so we keep this moving at a fast,
Less is preferable.
Right?
No problem.
Good spot.
Yep.
Yeah,
just so
it's
you
right
see
there.
yourself. Yeah.
And again, there's questions and answers, guys, at the end. So if you have questions right now, we want to make this, a conversation.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Again, thank you, Martin, Alex, team. All of you, thank you for coming. My name is Danny Sassoon. I am a residential mortgage loan officer. I currently work for Citizens Bank, where I have been for the last 3 years. Prior to that, I was a mortgage broker for 9 years. So I've been in the industry now 12 years. Came in at right around when the last recession was coming to a close. Interesting time we're having for this one. That's a conversation for another day. But my specialty is really working with first-time home buyers through the process for what's ultimately going to likely be the largest financial decision and move that you make. And what you need to know, even before you look at a place, before you go online to look at a property, before you go with Alex and Martin to go find the property, is how much can you afford? Can you afford the apartment that you're renting in if you had to buy it? Can you afford the building next door? Can you afford a house? How do you know this? And it starts by having a quick, easy 15 to 30-minute conversation with a mortgage lender to do what's called a mortgage pre-approval, where we take a look at your finances and discuss what you can afford every month. We look at what you're renting. Are you paying $1,500, $3,000, $5,000 a month in rent? Translate that to what would that be if this was a mortgage payment? How much can you potentially afford if you're looking at an apartment in New York City that would come with a mortgage as well as maintenance or common charges? So we look into what is your monthly budget. We then look at how much can you afford to come up for a down payment. And we put the two together, how much you can afford monthly and how much you have available for a down payment. And that actually gets us to what the sweet spot should be for what your purchase price is. Taking the two together, merging them together, then if you can afford $4,000 a month and you have $100,000 for a down payment, what purchase price does that equal? That's part of the conversation, that first conversation that we have. Really focus in on what you can afford. The second part of that conversation is, how do we know what you would qualify for from a bank? Now we know what you can afford. And let's say you can afford $4,000 a month, or you can afford a $600,000 apartment. Would the bank lend you that money? Would the bank allow you to purchase that apartment? And this is where we complete the mortgage pre-approval by focusing on three main things. And you can think of this as the CIA. We're looking at your credit, your income, and your assets. These are the three pillars that banks look at when they're determining how much of a mortgage you can qualify for and what purchase price you can afford. Your credit, your income, and your assets. All three need to stand together. All three, one cannot shine on its own. We do need all three. So we look into your credit. Do you have any debt? How much your credit scores are, or how much your credit scores are, and look to see your credit history. And that's where we take a look at your credit. For income, we look at what you do for a living. Do you have your own business? Do you work for a company? How much money do you earn? How much money do you project to earn? And then when we look at your assets, how much money you have available now, whether it's in savings, stocks, crypto, retirement. Are you getting money from family? All this is taken into consideration to see how much of a loan you would qualify for. And the goal is that the two things that we're looking at, how much you can afford and how much you can qualify for, come together and meet along the same line. So if you can afford a $600,000 apartment, and we want to make sure that the bank would lend you enough money to get that $600,000 apartment, that's the goal. We then pre-approve you for that $600,000, and that's when you then work with Alex and Martin and the team to go ahead and find you that $600,000 apartment so that you're ready to take off to the next steps. But you need that pre-approval first. So A, you can confidently search for that apartment knowing I've already been vetted and I already know what I can afford. I had that conversation. And secondly, the seller, if you're going to look at an apartment, they know you're serious because you've already taken steps to speak to a mortgage lender, find out that ultimately, if you want to buy this place, you've already been pre-vetted and they know you will be able to afford and qualify for this apartment. So that's why the mortgage pre-approval comes first, even before you start going to open houses or even before you start looking online, because you want to know with confidence that you'll be able to afford ultimately that apartment.
Great. Thank you, Danny. Very good. Well, yeah, it's
Yeah, seriously,
It's
get the
okay.
stage right.
all right. Well, Ramsey, you can relax. You can sit down. It's good. It's okay. You can relax. It's good. This is Ramsey's first time, so you can be a guest. Easy breezy. Easy breezy.
Yes.
So just a little bit of what Danny was touching on, right? It's suddenly not just looking at properties, it's kind of getting a whole team of people together, right? So you have your mortgage broker. New York State is an attorney state, so we're gonna have Gary Katz, that's also part of your team, and then Alex and Ramses and I will fill you in a little bit on the market, which of course is hot, and how do I beat out everybody, and how does it work, and all that stuff. So Gary, you want to talk a little bit about why do we need an attorney? And make sure you're in front of the camera, Gary.
I'm in the camera.
All right, beautiful.
Hey guys, Gary Katz. I am a partner with the law firm of Ross, Katz and Patchnanda. I have been doing real estate transactions now for about 16 or 17 years. I learned under the tutelage of my parents, who are both real estate attorneys. They have about 100 years of experience between the two of them. So whether you fall on the nature or nurture side of the argument, I meet both criteria. Before I get into why we need an attorney, I just wanted to follow up on something Daniel said, which was about the brokers. It's important to find your own broker. As a buyer, this is hack number one. As a buyer, get your own broker. It's very easy to go online and look at Zillow and see an apartment that you fall in love with and say, I'm going to call the broker who's listing the apartment. That's fine, but you should have someone on your side. And the best part is you don't pay for it. The seller pays for it. So it's really important to get your own broker. They will represent you. They will go, they will negotiate on your behalf. They will inspect the apartment with you. They will be there and they will be on your team, as opposed to if you just go to the seller's broker and now you're, at the end of the day, if there's a conflict, whose side are they going to take? The person who's writing them their check or the person who's not writing them their check? So that's hack number one. Hack number two, I would tell you, you want an attorney who's going to charge you a flat fee. Real estate transactions, some of them go smoothly, some of them don't. And you just want someone who's going to charge you a flat fee so you're not shocked at the closing table when they hand you a bill for 5 times what you thought the attorney fee would be. Speaking of that, or speaking to that, and going back to the whole team issue, the next hack I wanted to talk about is finding the attorney that's right for you. I handle all my files personally. That's a fancy way to say that I'm a sole practitioner. When you call, I'm going to pick up the phone. When you email me, I'm going to respond to you. There are other people out there who like the idea of having the law firm experience. They want a paralegal, an associate, and a partner all on their team and all is going to represent them. It's up to you. You find what the best fit for you is. But I promise you, if you call the partner, they're going to tell you to call the associate. And when you call the associate, they're going to tell you to call the paralegal. And if you do get through to the partner, they're going to just say, I have to talk to the paralegal. So just find what's best for you. But just speaking personally, there's nothing wrong with having a sole practitioner for a real estate transaction. As far as the why, in New York, we have a few different types of properties. We have co-ops, condos, and single families or multifamilies. And basically why you need an attorney is because the co-ops and the condos come with rules, the house rules. And I'm sure many of you have heard nightmare stories about co-op boards, but just understand what a co-op board is. They are a group of shareholders who are looking to protect their investment as well. It's a thankless job. They volunteer their time. They don't get paid, and they are looking to protect the interest of the co-op. So one of the reasons why you need an attorney and why you need a good broker is because they're going to help you get through the board. They're going to help you understand the rules. There's something called due diligence, which is the very beginning of the process. After you have an accepted offer, you want an attorney who's going to do some due diligence. They're going to review the financials of the building, the bylaws, the house rules, the offering plan. You know, I know this sounds dry, and I always joke, and some people here have heard my joke that it's not the sexiest area of law. They're not going to make Law and Order real estate division anytime soon. But it is important to have someone who knows what they're doing and knows how to protect your interests. I mean, just one of the war stories I could tell you is there's something called lot line windows. If the window of a building is on the lot line and then the next door neighbor sells their air rights, you could lose that window. Most famous person I've ever heard of, Jason Biggs, American Pie. He lost his bedroom or a kitchen window or a bathroom. I forget what window he lost, but his attorney didn't know that the building had lot line windows and they lost it. After the due diligence process, you want someone who's going to negotiate for you. They're going to add, the seller's attorney prepares the first draft of the contract. The buyer's attorney reviews it, adds what's called the rider, gives you some extra protections. Make sure there hasn't been any issues with the leaks, neighbors, noises, odors, all the bad things that could possibly happen after you close and after you move into the apartment. You want to know as much before you can. You want to get that knowledge. As far as anything else goes, you want to attend the attorney's going to attend the closing with you. I guess that's also very important because you're going to have questions about the loan documents you signed. Danny's going to put a stack of papers in front of you this big, and you should know what you're signing. And then the other thing, I guess the last hack I'll talk about real quick is find an attorney, whether it be a big firm or a small firm, find someone who knows what they're doing in real estate. It's very easy to know your father's golf buddy who does tax law and he's gonna give you a discount. It's not worth it. Because there may come a time where he just doesn't know something about the process. You know, I always say most attorneys can stumble their way through a real estate transaction. However, if something goes wrong, you want someone with experience. You want someone who knows what they're doing. You want someone who's been there, who's experienced it, and knows how to handle the real estate transaction. You know, thankfully, nobody's waiting for, a heart transplant or a pardon from the governor, and most issues can be resolved with money, but you want to make sure that it's not your money. So if there's any, how much time do I have left? Am I good?
Yeah, you got a few minutes, whatever you want. You're doing great, Gary. You're like speeding through.
Thank you. Really, other than that, I mean, we're going to do a Q&A at the end, but that's really the, bird's eye view of things. If you want to get specific, I always tell people that you deserve a CAT's attorney, knowledgeable, attentive, trustworthy, and zealous. The problem with that marketing tagline is that there are a lot of attorneys named CATs out there. So on that note, I will turn it over to the brokers. And we'll move on.
Gary, that was awesome. Thank you. So I'm gonna have Alex come up here and talk in a minute. So just kind of a show of hands. How many are people are just kind of like interested in the market and what's going on? Right? And then how many people, is there anybody that's out there looking hard right now, charging? Alex is, you are, good. So it's good. This is what this is about. I just wanted to get a little pulse of everything. So Alex is our team's #1 salesperson. And kind of
call it super broker.
And what we like about Alex is some brokers buyers brokers will send you out, go look at the property, then maybe we'll email it. Alex and Ramsey's, for that matter, they're out there, quote unquote, on the street with you, looking at things. So Alex has a bunch of great insights of what the market's like and what's going on. So Alex, take it away.
Great. Hello. How are you? Great to be here. So unlike my friends over here, I have a lot of notes. I'm like a super genius when it comes to brokering, so I don't want to miss anything. But I can't stress enough. Hack number 100 million that you walk out here with is who you work with matters. The team you have around you matters. You hire the right people, they'll eat nails for you. Okay, so you want the best mortgage lender that you can get, you want the best lawyer that you can get, and you want the best broker that you can get. Why? This is the biggest investment of your life. You don't want to lose money. You don't want to, experience a big issue or big problem. And the job of the super broker is to make sure that there are no problems or issues. As a realtor, we wear many hats. I'm part life coach. I'm part tour guide. I'm a fierce negotiator. I'm a numbers cruncher. I do it all. And when you hire an agent, that's the kind of person you need to hire. This is probably the most complicated and complex transaction of your life. You don't want to stumble through it. You want to hire professionals, experts, and that's what this forum is all about. So I want to backtrack a little bit and just talk about the market. People always want to know, is this a good time to buy? What's been happening? Generally, the real estate market has been gangbusters. To go backwards a little bit, 2015, 2016, 2017 was probably the peak. Price per square foot was bonkers. People were buying homes sight unseen based off of a floor plan. It was going up, up, up. And everything that goes up must come down. So 2018, 2019 was a time of correction. Pricing coming down, demand coming down, supply going up. And right at the beginning of 2020, things started to turn. And then something happened, I forget. A pandemic happened, a global pandemic that really scared everybody and made people question everything about life, where they're living, what they're doing. And a lot of people fled New York. And that was a scary time to be a realtor. June 2020 to December 2020 was probably the most intense period of my life, probably all of you. But on top of that, I had to convince people that buying real estate in New York was a good idea. I could not give properties away. Literally, I was begging people and they were like, huh, buy an apartment in New York? Are you crazy? The people that were crazy followed Warren Buffett's advice. Be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. The time to buy is not when everyone's happy and, bidding wars. The time to buy is when people are scared, when no one wants to buy. Why? Because that means you get a deal of a lifetime. And if you guys remember, November 2020, there was some kind of election going on. People were not sure what was going to happen to America. Would democracy live? Would the virus take over and kill us all? But we got a new president, and then we got a vaccine, and they began to roll out that vaccine. So what happened? It gave people confidence. And capitalism, all markets need what? Confidence. And literally January, February, March, April was like the busiest market I think any of us in real estate in New York have ever seen. Since then, things have started to normalize, but I think it's clear that if anyone thought New York could be killed, that New York's over, we are not over, we're alive, we are growing every day. I'm blown away by the life in this city. So I mentioned that I'm actively looking to buy right now. Why? Why would a realtor be buying in a pretty hot market? Why? Because rents are just going up. Interest rates are just going up.
Because you made a lot of money last year.
You need a down payment. You cannot afford to buy property without a down payment. So Sean is very right about that. But from my standpoint, the market's going to be up, up, up. Does that mean you buy anything? No. You hire an agent to help you with that process, to give you their opinion, their feedback. I always tell people that finding an apartment is like dating. Most of them will not work for you, and that's okay. You don't need 6 apartments. You could have 6 boyfriends or girlfriends, depending. But you really just need one apartment that you love. A lot of times people walk into an open house and they have like 50 questions and they're like, what year was the building made? And what's the sublease policy? And they haven't even looked at the apartment. Some of you may be very analytical. You want to crunch the numbers and know all the details. But how about you just walk around the apartment first and decide if you like it, if you love it, if it's a good fit for you. And then later, we can ask 50 questions and 100 questions. We can find out every piece of information about this building, about this apartment, valuation, what something sold in the same building 2 months ago, what something sold in the same building a year ago. Is this a good deal? Where is it priced? We can give you all of that data and information. And that's why you work with great people. Great. So I just want to scan through some of my things here because I don't want to miss anything. A lot of times people want to know how much I cost because a lot of times when you rent an apartment, you pay a brokerage fee. The great thing is you get me or Martin or Ramses for free. How amazing is that, right? The seller pays all of the commissions. And a lot of times buyers think, if I go in without a broker, I'm going to get a better deal. No. Why? Because the seller's broker cares about one person, and that's the seller. They don't care about you. You want someone that has your best interest in mind, someone that's going to guide you, protect you, introduce you to some amazing referral partners, lenders, home inspectors, lawyers, basically anyone you need in this process, we can help you with. We know how to present an offer. If you open your folder, there's a bunch of different handouts. This is probably one of the most important. It's known as the financial statement. You provide this whenever you submit an offer. It's essentially a financial snapshot of your picture. It lets the seller and the seller's broker know what your assets look like, your liabilities, your income. Can you afford this property? Along with a pre-approval. It shows the seller that you are ready to go. This is an intense city that we live in. No seller wants to accept an offer with a buyer that's not ready to sign. A couple of other things here. To me, the person you work with is your project manager. They're going to oversee everything. Their job is to make sure you don't have any issues. So when you work with the best, you have a really positive experience. I want to wrap up with a couple of quick quotes, if that's okay. And then we'll get into maybe
Alex is a
more.
great quote guy.
I love quotes, and these are three. I already gave you one of my favorites, Warren Buffett. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. This is a great quote about buying real estate. The best time to buy a home is always 5 years ago. Because markets go up. Okay, that's Ray Brown. And one more quote, my favorite. The true New Yorker secretly believes that people living anywhere else have to be, in some sense, kidding. Jason Updike. That's it, yeah.
Oh, great, Alex. Really good. So thanks, guys. So just a quick show of hands again. Who came here from Ramses? Who knows Ramses? Everybody. So I just want to do a shout out to Ramses right now. He is, and I do want to give just one of the most exceptional people that I know. He came to our team, as you may have known him as a rental broker or not, or as a friend, and he wanted to learn and grow and go into sales. And he is just skyrocketing. So if you know Ramses, there's no dimmer switch. It's either on or off. And I've only seen him on all the time. And this is just an example. It was we had a buyer, and it was a couple, baby on the way, and they were out of town for the weekend. And they were interested in 4 or 5 properties. They were sad they couldn't see properties that Sunday. Ramses went out and made a video of each property and gave his advice on each one, so these people could come back and see it. And what was it, out of the 5 or whatever they wanted to see, almost all of them that you took videos of? Yeah. So I mean, like, that doesn't happen, just to be honest with you, like that. So he is all in, ready to go. So I just want to give him a shout out. So one of the things I wanted to talk, which is kind of fun, and you guys have all these, this is your goodie folder as opposed to a goodie bag per se. And I'm really impressed that people came out here just to kind of get a feel of what's happening or what the interest is. So I just wanted to go over kind of a little bit of buyer hacks here for a couple minutes. So this is what happens, and as kind of a little like insight for you, we sell as many we represent the seller as many times as we represent the buyer. So we're kind of we know how to prep a property. We have Sean, Stage, and Style, right? Because what usually happens for buyers is they go to RH or pick your favorite furniture store. And you're like, oh, this is the perfect couch I want to have. Now I need to find the apartment that's going to fit this couch. So these are some hacks, quote unquote, that as you get more serious, one thing can go. So this is what I always call is consider the slightly imperfect properties, right? I'll be perfectly honest. If you can find a property you don't have to do any work to, like, that's the easiest low-hanging fruit, right? But newsflash, everybody's looking for that. And because this is New York, there's always going to be somebody that is willing to pay more for the property than you are at that exact moment in time. So the odds of actually getting that apartment is low. I'm just being honest with you, and again, in this market. So these are just some thoughts, right, to think around. Is that, again, since we represent sellers, we make sure the apartments are painted and staged beautifully. So perhaps look beyond the ugly orange walls and the brown couch that is totally stained and gross, right, from dog pee or something. So that's just kind of a way. And then also, a lot of people, and we've noticed this, is a lot of people get thrown off if a room has a desk in, they automatically think it's a home office. Well, could it also be a bedroom? Or just kind of think, just because the furniture is in the room doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way. Some inexpensive things, and again, representing the seller side, we do this with sellers, is that we come in and I don't know if you guys remember, but cherry cabinets were the thing 10 or 15 years ago. We're now painting all those cabinets, not white, but what gray? Gray's the new white. It's a $4,000 or $5,000 fix, completely transforms the kitchen. Similarly with bathroom, if you don't like that. So these are just kind of things to think about looking at it. One thing I also, so that's kind of the slight imperfections of property, kind of, start with what you want, but then kind of think a little outside of the box if you will. The other thing is, and this is one of my favorite, is always location, kind of what Alex said, the best home is the one I should have bought 5 years ago. I've been in the business for 22 years. Just in as an example, I started out as quote unquote a downtown broker, and I had people telling me, I won't go above 14th Street. Then it was, I won't go above 23rd Street. Now it's, well, I'll go to Bushwick, right? So that just shows you how the things are. So if quote unquote the neighborhood you think is hot or the market thinks is hot right now, just look right outside that ring, because trust me, the next cycle, that's going to be the neighborhood. And then here with bidding competitively, these are where a bunch of these cheat sheet things are. So you'll find out when you go to, Alex, you just helped some buyers out. It was in Park Slope.
Which buyers?
The one that was like 21 offers.
Oh, yeah.
So one apartment, 21 offers coming in. So how do you beat something like that, quote unquote? And these were just some hacks that I had for you. Is that here, I said, well, if the asking price is just under 2 and talking to your trusted advisor, which hopefully or Alex, is that you say, well, okay, market's telling me it's worth maybe 225. I always come in and say, let's bid at an odd number. Because at the end of the day, it's called the highest and best. And sometimes the extra $3,000 really, beats that out. The other thing that's interesting is I always call it's called a letter of introduction or a love letter to the property. Usually you will have 2 sellers on the property, right? And one is very analytical. They want to look at your snapshot of your asset and liabilities. And the other one is the emotional property. They're emotionally attached. It's usually the husband that's emotionally attached, just as an FYI. Oh, it's so important to me and blah, 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 blah. So you write the letter. Oh, I can't, I really love the details you did in the kitchen, cherry cabinets. I wish I would have them forever or whatever, right? So and you'd be interested. I mean, we've represented buyers that we did not have the highest price, but the letter, it was important to them that the home was going to somebody else that was going to care.
That would beat out like an all cash offer.
Well, within reason, right? And sometimes all cash offers are not all that cracked up to be what it sounds like either, which I'll jump into here in a second, right? Which is here, if you're comfortable, you can make an offer with non-contingent on financing, meaning that you're allowed to get financing. But talking to your mortgage broker, you're confident enough the bank will lend in it, that you're not requiring contingent financing on it.
Talk to your lawyer about that.
And talk to your attorney, right? Mortgage pre-approval letter, and then also have your team in place. This is also where I've been on the other side, where I represented sellers, and the buyer wins the bid, and we're like, great, buyer and buyer's broker, where's the attorney information? Oh, we have to find an attorney now. Well, the attorney they thought they were going to get is on vacation. The backup attorney is dead. It's now 4 days have gone, and the backup offer says, here's my attorney, I'll match the offer, then I have the property. Where does the seller go with, right? So those are kind of some things, just kind of some fun hacks on it. So with that, I mean, I'm pretty much open for, questions or conversations or anything. So maybe Alex and Danny and Gary, you might want to come back up and then field questions.
Yeah, I got a question. So, I've been monitoring the market and, rents, the best deals, or like the last best deals of rent was like probably earlier this year, like January, February, March, April, then it kind of, went to shit and then things went back to normal. So now in a cycle of after 1 year when the lease expires, or if you sign a 2-year agreement, you would think that, those people that maybe would not want to afford the normal rate would then exit, right? And so right now, there's like not a lot of supply, like it used to be in COVID time. So where do you see those people that got those deals, are they gonna exit? And then there's gonna be a bunch of supply with maybe the people that went to Miami coming back, like, how do you see the rental market in the next like year based on the deals expiring?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is there's no way to know for sure, but my estimate is that the people that came a year ago were kind of coming like unsure. They got a killer deal, so they signed it. Now you look outside, you're meeting friends for brunch, you're going to a happy hour, you have tickets for a theater show. Life is back. Your life is here. If you cannot afford that increase that they're going to provide you, try to fight them, beg them, negotiate with them. But my feeling is that most people are just going to begrudgingly sign because they can't get a better deal. The deals out there are worse. So if your rent is going up 30%, but at least it's not double what you're seeing out there, so my feeling is that the rental market should get a little bit better for renters, but a year ago, that's gone.
Got it. So like, let's say if someone, I'm sorry. So let's say if someone's in a position where they're getting a deal, right, and it's gonna expire in another year or whatever. Does that owner gonna, is he basically gonna give a concession better than what's out in the market? Because they're like, oh, this guy's good for 2 years, or he's gonna go back to market rate, or it's gonna be synonymous to anything else in the market?
My feeling is that landlords care about one thing, that's money. Some landlords will like that you're a great tenant, that you always pay the rent on time, that you're easygoing, easy breezy, and they give you a little bit of a discount. But what I usually tell my landlords is scare them. Give them the market rent, scare them, $2,000 more. They freak out, they negotiate, you keep a great tenant, they feel like they got a deal, landlord's happy. That comes from years of doing it, but
That's a good hack.
yeah, but
Wouldn't that be a reverse hack?
We'll save that for the landlord.
Depends what side.
my feeling is the sooner you buy, the better. But again, you have to love it. I'm not telling you to buy anything. If you find something that's 300 square feet and looks into a wall, don't buy it unless you love it. Okay?
I think my woods in the same position.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell a story in a second, but I was curious, what are the current interest rates? And the mansion tax, that's 1% one time or every year? And I had another question, is typical 20% down or 25? What do you currently?
Okay, so for the interest rates right now, they vary based on the day, what you're buying, what your credit score is. The average rate right now on a 30-year fixed mortgage, which is the most basic conservative mortgage, is anywhere between 3.5% and 4%. Now, these rates historically are really good. These rates in the most recent past 2 years are definitely higher than what they were the last 2 years, which is because the last 2 years were not normal. The rates right prior to the pandemic were right around the low to mid threes. Then the pandemic happened and the rates absolutely crashed and they went into the 2% range, 2.5, 2.75. Now they've come back up, which is what they were always supposed to do. And my belief, along with a lot of other people, is that this is going to be a trend that continues. Right now, the rates have gone up about 1% in the last 3 months. So right around the holiday time, right around the end of December, the rates were about 1% lower than they were now. So it's already had a big movement the last 3 months. I don't think there'll be that much of a dramatic movement that quickly, but the trend would be that if we're having this conversation a year from now, I think it'll be at higher rates.
But still historically low.
Still historical. When I came into the business in 2010, my company was having basically the best year ever because the rates had just dipped below 6% for the first time. And wow, people were getting 5.99%. They were refinancing their mortgage. 2 years later, they were getting 4.99, then 3.99. So historically, really, really low interest rates. The most recent history, they are up a little bit, but they are still really great.
Can you explain to people why that matters to them, the interest rates?
Absolutely. So looking directly from last year, where the rate might have been 1% lower, somebody's monthly payments based on an interest rate movement of 1% their monthly payments move 10%. So let's look at the numbers. If somebody's rate was 3% and their payment was going to be $5,000 for a, let's say, $1 million mortgage, that same $1 million mortgage at 4% is now $5,500 a month. So that same mortgage, just a different interest rate, now costs 10% more solely based on the interest rate movement. So if rates continue to go up, which is what's expected, then unless your budget starts to change, the monthly payments will go up, even if you're just looking at the same exact apartment at the same exact price 1 year later. So is it a good time to buy is always the great question. And 5 years ago was the best time to buy, but it's not going to get cheaper to buy, whether that's from a price standpoint or from an interest rate standpoint. The cost of owning is not going to get cheaper than it is today. Even though it was cheaper a few months ago, in a few months from now, it'll be more expensive.
20% or 25%?
Also depends. Now, New York City is mainly co-ops. So when you're dealing with co-ops, co-ops have their own rules, and they usually have a requirement of 20%, 25%. It depends. Every single co-op is different. But when you're buying a condo or you're buying a house, the action doesn't even need to be 20%. You could buy for less. Depending on your price point, you could buy for as little as 10% down or even as little as 5% down, depending on the price point and depending on if you qualify for that mortgage. Now, getting that approved by the seller for such a low down payment, that's a different story. That depends on how well you guys can negotiate. But the bank would approve somebody with as little as 5 or 10% down for a condo or a house.
But you have to pay PMI, right?
Yes, whenever you put down less than 20%, there is a temporary extra insurance the bank makes you pay per month called mortgage insurance. It goes away once you have 20% equity in the apartment or house, but it's an extra monthly insurance the bank takes out when you have less than 20% down.
Do you offer discounts for another 25%?
The more you put down, the better rate you get because you're less of a risk to the bank. And you asked about mansion tax. So mansion tax is a running joke these days because it's a tax that New York State charges for anything $1 million or more. And $1 million can get you in some areas of the apartment that's right around it. It is a one-time tax that you pay upon purchasing. It is now actually tiered, and it's not 1% anymore. It is 1% from 1 million up to a purchase price of 1,999. Then at 2 million, it goes to 1.25%. At 3 million, it goes to 1.5%.
And so on and so forth.
So on and so on.
But just going back to the whole part about what $1 million buys, you understand that the mansion tax was implemented in like 1982 when the first Governor Cuomo was in office. And $1 million really did buy you a mansion. And I have people ask me all the time, say, Gary, you know, it's a one bedroom, am I really getting a mansion? I always tell them there is a condo in Chelsea where the apartments were going off in the 8 figures, like 10 million and up. And they built 3 parking spaces that they were charging $1 million for. And because they were individual condominium units, people were paying mansion tax on parking spaces. That is a true story. Yeah, you looked a little surprised by that. I was too when I first heard that.
But can you lump the tax into your mortgage?
You usually pay the closing costs in addition to the down payment. There are times it can be financed, but it is usually paid in addition to the down payment.
But not in New York City, right? You can't finance.
There's something called the seller's concession, which goes up to what, 6%?
Where you can negotiate the seller to pay a portion of the closing costs on your behalf. And if the seller's paying it, you are essentially financing.
You're artificially inflating the purchase price so that you can get an 80% mortgage on the higher amount to include some of your closing costs.
So if your closing costs were $50,000, you would essentially increase the sales price $50,000, and then the seller would give you a credit so you don't have to pay those closing costs.
So Gary, in a competitive market like this, do you have your clients still do inspections on apartments before they sign contracts?
I let them make the business decision. I mean, to me, that is a personal decision. It also depends on the building. I mean, an inspector in a large building, they're not gonna be able to inspect the roof, they're not gonna be able to inspect the boiler, they're just gonna look at the apartment. And I always tell people, it's kind of a what you see is what you get situation. And if you're concerned, go back, test the water pressure, test the water temperature, make sure it gets warm enough for you or hot enough for you. You know, test the ACs, test the appliances, because that's really what an inspector is gonna do. I mean, other than that, they're gonna find that the outlet has reverse polarity, and I think Martin and I were just talking about that the other day, where half the outlets in all of New York City have reverse polarity. If you were buying a small townhouse type building where there's 6 units, I would recommend it, because any repair that you have is going to be exponentially a greater share of the repair, and they will get to see the roof and they will get to test the boiler. And so it really, there's a lot of variables in it, but yes, I let them make the decision.
Just to follow up on that, I found that post-pandemic, you know, everyone dealing with emotional anxiety, and after what happened in Miami with those buildings just collapsing suddenly, I found almost every transaction I'm on, whether I'm working for the buyer or the seller, there is an inspection. And the way I present it from when I work with buyers is we just are doing this for peace of mind. We're not looking to renegotiate, you know, and sometimes you find something that's less than ideal. But again, if it was a multiple bid situation and you want this apartment, this is not the opportunity. Oh, can you fix that? Can you fix this? Most sales are as is condition.
And that sort of goes back to what Martin was saying about finding an imperfect apartment that you can live with. If you're not buying brand spanking new, high-end, new construction, there's going to be imperfections. And very often the seller has lived with it for so long, they don't even realize that it's an imperfection. But you do have to just kind of take it for what you're getting. And, you know, again, like I said earlier, it's kind of a what you see is what you get situation. So go and look at the oven, feel the refrigerator, make sure it's cold, make sure the ice maker is colder, you know, test the water pressure, because without getting into too much legalese, the contract's going to say that you're buying the plumbing has to be in working order. Well, what's working order? It's kind of a vague term. If water's coming out of the shower spout, that's working order. If it's not warm enough or strong enough pressure for you, you're kind of, you have no recourse at that point. So go back to the apartment, whether it be with an inspector or it be with your broker, and just really kick the tires.
And just to piggyback off of that, I think one of the key words in New York City real estate is trade-off. Okay, almost at every price point, you're not going to get everything that you want. At $10 million, you're going to want 6 fireplaces, and this place only has 5. Let's go, you know.
Can you stay in the frame?
Oh,
You need the camera for that, Alex?
sorry.
Any other questions?
I do have questions on mortgage.
Yes.
How often do people, what's your thought on like locking it? Is it a 7-year rate lock-in or 8 and 10 years of car? And then you have it floating afterwards? How does that work? Is it, and then if I intend to keep the house to be less than 10 years or 8 years, well, I'd be better off just keeping locking in the lower rate within that period and you sell it off before that.
So that is unique to every person's financial and ultimate what their goals are. So there are different types of mortgages, to give a little background. There are different types of mortgages, some where you have an interest rate that is fixed for the lifetime of your mortgage, which means that you will have one mortgage payment and you'll only have to worry about that. You will never have the rate moving. There's another type of mortgage called an adjustable rate mortgage, which if you've seen The Big Short, makes it sound really scary, but it's not, where this is also a 30-year mortgage, but the interest rate is fixed for either 7 years or 10 years. Why would you do this instead of the conservative 30-year fixed? Because it's a lower interest rate during that 7 years or 10 years. So if your plan is to ultimately move out, upgrade, sell, pay it off, pay it down, then I would definitely recommend that, especially in the market that we're in now where rates have moved up, because you get an opportunity to get a rate as low as 3%, 2.9%, as opposed to the 3.5% or the 4%. You take on a little bit of additional risk, that in 7 years or 10 years, the rate might go up. But if you've sold that apartment after 3, 5, or 7 years, you don't face any of that risk and you get to have those savings. So if the plan is not to have the apartment long-term, then I do recommend those kind of products. But one thing is, if your plan is to hold on to that apartment and rent it out, then I almost never recommend it because you don't want to have that investment have a potentially moving rate.
But you could refinance.
You could refinance at a later time, but if you're refinancing because the rates are going up, you're refinancing to a higher rate and you're not going to probably lose those savings.
And generally, do they have, let's say the same amount, same credit profile, the same amount of borrowing, let's say 500K. Are there different prepayment penalties?
There's absolutely no prepayment
So it's the
penalties.
same thing.
Yes, so you can pay it down, you can pay it off, and there's no penalty whatsoever.
That's another question.
Yeah.
On the mortgage recording tax, 1.8%, like, is it co-op is the only one that does not have that?
Co-ops do not have mortgage recording tax at all.
Right.
Condos and houses do. It's actually a tiered percentage. It's 1.8% for below a $500,000 mortgage, and it's a 1.925% tax when it's a $500,000 mortgage or more.
So how do we think about that? Like, what do you guys think? Like, when we shop for a condo versus co-op versus like house, like if it's similar thing.
So closing costs are definitely something to think about because closing costs definitely vary co-op versus condo and house. And co-op closing costs are cheaper than condos and houses. Condo and houses, if you're purchasing below $1 million, the closing costs are usually about 3% of the sale price. If you're purchasing above $1 million, it's about 4% of the sale price. Whereas co-op closing costs are fixed and they're usually about $3,000 on co-ops below $1 million. And then if it's above $1 million, you add the 1% mansion tax. So to give you an example, if you have an $800,000 apartment, if it's a co-op, it's $3,000 in closing costs. If it's a condo, it's 3% of the sale price, which is about $25,000 in closing costs. So we have to budget accordingly when we're looking at different apartments just to make sure we know what our out-of-pocket is going to be based on whether it's a co-op or based on whether it's a condo.
And just one thing to add, when you're shopping, when you're looking at apartments, when you look at the co-op maintenance fee versus the condo common charge fee, keep in mind that the maintenance fees for co-ops include the property taxes. With a condo, when you just see a $400 common charge, that's just a common charge to the building, and then you'll have your property tax on top of that.
We have a question right here.
Go ahead. No, thank you.
Oh, yes.
I guess you can add in now, so the brokers can add in this question. You guys have been through a couple of rate rises and dips, the cycles, you've seen them. You mentioned that as we're going to see a rise in rates as we move forward, property prices might not dip, so we should buy. But like in terms of the bidding wars back in the day when there were rate rises, did those like come down? Because right now if you see the listed price, sometimes you end up paying 5, 6, 10% more of the listed price. Do you think we can actually end up buying at the listed price, or maybe even a bit lower, about 20 now?
So
And there's also the trade-off of the 1%
So-
hike and payment goes up. So.
what I'm seeing, at least in the most recent rate hike, which is just these past 3 months, versus what I saw 6 months ago, so the market in October, November, December. I saw it from October to December, people were just throwing money for apartments. I'll bid $50,000 more, I'll bid $200,000 more, because they were borrowing at such a cheap rate. The rates are still cheap, but now that the rates are higher than they were 4 months ago, I am still seeing a lot of bidding wars, but I'm not seeing people so willing to just pay an extra $100,000, pay an extra $200,000 above ask. So I'm seeing more, I don't see prices coming down, but I don't see those super above ask bids, at least on my side, than I was just 3 or 4 months ago. So they're not coming down, the prices are still right around ask, maybe 3% above, 4% above, not 10, 20% above, at least from the offers that I'm seeing people put in now, factoring in the high rates. But what are you saying?
And I would also just say generally, I think sometimes people get like a little bit overwhelmed. I'm not gonna win because someone's gonna come in all cash and come in 10% above the asking. why don't you just trust the process? You know, look at the homes that work for you and bid on properties. And if it gets a little bit too frothy, then you take a step back. I mean, interest rates go up and down to either compel people to act and spend money or to stop them from doing that so the economy doesn't overheat. Do you know? So everything kind of equalizes over time, I think. But to Danny's point, I feel like this market is just moving up, you know? So again, if you find something that you really love that checks off enough of your boxes and you can afford it, buy it.
And just to kind of take it off on a little bit of a light tangent, things happen for a reason. I've been doing this long enough to know that things happen for a reason. So submit that bid, even if you're worried about another cash offer, write the love letter and see what happens. And if it's meant to be, it will happen and you will get the apartment. And if it's not, then next week, Alex is going to show you an even better apartment.
That's true.
I got a couple questions. Is it easier to buy an apartment than rent one? Because I feel like renting is insane here. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Here. Second question, condos and co-ops, how do they differ?
Yeah, I can do a whole 2-hour seminar on that. The very short version is when you buy a condo, you're buying the box, you're buying the real estate. When you're buying a co-op, you're buying shares of stock in a corporation and the corporation leases you the apartment.
Sure.
It's not an ordinary lease that expires every year or two. It usually goes out at least 30 years. And the reason for it goes out at least 30 years is, in theory, while it's never actually happened to my knowledge, the collateral could go away. The corporation could shut down, sell the building, and everyone would be out on the butts, and Danny's collateral will be gone. So banks want to make sure that the proprietary lease goes out at least 30 years. The board, as I started to mention, you have to live by the house rules. They're usually much stricter about subletting and various other, intricacies. But really, those are the two big things. And then from the financial standpoint, you don't have mortgage reporting tax. A mortgage is an actual document used in legal terms having to do with real estate. And since you're not buying real estate when you buy a co-op, you're buying shares of stock, you're buying personal property, there's no mortgage reporting tax per se.
Real quick about your question about renting, I agree, New York City is crazy for rentals, the amount of paperwork you need to provide. I once had a client who owned property in Ohio, and he was like, I bought houses and I didn't need to present all of this paperwork. Just so you know, New York housing laws are very pro-tenant. So if you stop paying your rent, to get you out is very involved. Could take 6 months, a year. So that's why the landlord really verifies and double checks everything and makes you go through that crazy process. And then your question was, is buying easier? I don't think it's easier. I think it could be a little bit more complicated. I think the processes are actually very similar. If anything, I think the housing stock of apartments you can buy are higher quality.
Yeah.
So you actually feel happier when you're looking to buy. Because a lot of the rentals are very sad and very expensive.
Sad and expensive.
They are.
So just kind of wrap up 1 or 2 more questions, and we can still sit around.
And then we'll have another.
Sean is also our social director. He wants everybody to.
And the biggest thing about today's event is not that we answer every single question that you have, although we want to. It's to build the relationship so you guys get to know us and use us as a resource. Call us, email us, shoot us a text, even if it's just a question about something. That's what we do all day long, right? Non-stop calls, texts. And we like it. It keeps the day active.
One last question by anybody?
I got a question. So, obviously when you're buying property, price arbitrage is important and some of the best deals are foreclosures, right? And in Manhattan, let's say if you're interested in like a pristine building that's modern, nice, like upgraded, do foreclosures, are they frequent? That's the first question. And if so, do you have systems in place that you can see that kind of stuff where like a user that's not in real estate can't see just by Googling it? Do you have access to that kind of thing?
Me personally, I do not do anything with foreclosures.
There are 2 kind of foreclosure sales. Are you talking about are you talking about going to the actual foreclosure auction? Or are you talking about bank-owned properties that they took back after the foreclosure?
Maybe like before it goes to the auction, because then it'll come to bidding more. Like, do you guys have insight into like you know, what's gonna come on the market, and then if we work with you, we can see kind of forecasted insight and maybe purchase something before it goes into the bidding war.
Well, as far as actual intel, not really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's in New York City, there's not much.
Oh, there's a few, it's just that the market is so efficient, it's it's pragmatically speaking, it's not worth it.
But you can get the information from whoever's putting on the auction about what's owed on the property, what the initial bidding price is going to be, what the minimum price is, you know, stuff like that you can get prior to the foreclosure auction.
Okay, well, before I say thanks to everybody, just one last note that I just wanted to throw out there as an idea is whatever you can afford now or over the next 12 to 24 months, just get on the real estate ladder. I mean, I'm kind of a broker with a lot of wealth advisors, and they always tell them to get on the ladder. And being in the industry for 22 years, I've met school teachers that bought property 30, 40 years ago for nothing, and now they're selling for millions of dollars, and it's just a dramatic wealth change for the entire thing. So that's kind of my thoughts.
So, yeah.
That's right. So,
Go ahead, Sean. No, what's a hack? A hack, what does that mean?
that's the new trendy term.
A shortcut.
A shortcut.
Oh, okay.
That's a hack.
That's a hack. That's the hack of the hack. So, thank you, Danny Sassoon from Citizens Bank. Well, go ahead. A photo? Come on up, Ramses.
No,
Come on in.
legal.
All right.
This is for the internet. That's great, thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody out there. I really appreciate it. All right.
No, man, you're good.
I'm sorry, I didn't steal your thunder
Good.
about getting your own.
You're killing it.
Very nice.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.